Hi, my name is Niina, and you're listening Together Through the Storms podcast. Welcome to the journey with me. I would like to begin by acknowledging traditional owners of the land where I'm recording this episode today, which is the Wurrung country. I would like to pay my respects to the eldest past and present, and to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who may be listening today. Hey everybody, and welcome back Together Through the Storms podcast. My name is Niina, and on today's episode I am chatting to a wonderful woman called Chrissie. Chrissie is a mom to two beautiful boys, and although I have just met Chrissie, I feel like our paths were always meant to cross. Chrissie's story and her vulnerability almost made me speechless. I do want to give you a little trigger warning. Today's episode will mention losing your child. So if you feel that that topic is triggering to you, please make sure that you reach out for some help. I will share some free supports on the episode description that you can reach out to. Let's go and listen to Chrissie. Hi, Chrissie, and thanks so much for joining me on my podcast today.
I'm absolutely honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have this time with you and hear a little bit about your journey. But would you like to introduce yourself first for the listeners, please?
Thanks, Niina. My name is Chrissie. I am a mum to two boys. We live here in Geelong. And I think part of the story that I have to share is coming forward as a mum who has gone through an experience where my youngest child was given a diagnosis, a medical condition that really turned our lives upside down. As a result of going through that experience, I went on a very long journey of my own through the depths of the change, in amongst also moving from Sydney to Geelong in the same couple of months when the diagnosis happened, and learning a lot about myself. And then sort of challenging myself to really get myself back on track. I'd gone from a very high-flying corporate, incredible lifestyle, travel, and, had all these incredible plans and dreams and expectations for what our life was going to look like. And in 2015, that all got turned on its head. Just came out of left field for us, as it does for so many families. And the journey beyond that, coming through and learning how to change my mindset, learning how to adapt to the big emotions that I was feeling, how to start to show up better as the role model and the mum, and find my self-confidence and find my voice again. There's a quote about learning to find joy in the life that we were living that really sort of pushed me into this pathway. Once I had the tools and the strategies and I started to feel a bit more like I was capable of doing the things that I wanted to do, I actually went back and studied those. Thanks to COVID, the silver lining, I had to close my clinic as a reflexologist. But it did give me the time to study through a couple of diplomas and as a trainer so that I can now turn around and share what I've learned with others and try and help others, specifically in that space of working with other mums or other parents that have gone through that derailing experience of having a change or a shift as a result to a diagnosis of one or more of our kids that are just, creating a little bit of a different journey than what maybe we thought we would be on. I think that's in a nutshell.
Yeah, wow.
So I'm a coach and a trainer, and I sort of work in that space with helping other people as much as possible around the full-time care of my son, who just turned 12. And it's a juggling act, but we're all in it, juggling all the things.
I love that. And like you said, 2015. So if I look at myself, like you're many years ahead of this journey. So I'm really privileged to be here today. And we had a little chat prior, and I've heard a little bit about your story, and I just can't put into words how touching that is. Like I get goosebumps just sitting here and listening to you. So I am so grateful that you're sharing with us today some of your learnings and your experiences on this journey. So thank you. Okay, Chrissie, it's time for the icebreaker question. Are you ready?
Hit me, go for it.
All right, great. So, what is the scariest or the bravest thing that you have ever done?
I don't know if anyone can relate, but I feel like my youth was like a different person. So I've done amazing things. I've bungee jumped. I've been skydiving. I used to really love that sort of adrenaline style. Put me on the tallest roller coaster as quickly as possible. I don't know. Recently, actually, I think as you get older, when we were last in New Zealand, I went and I was like, nope, nope, I don't need to jump off this bridge. Nope, I got nothing to prove. I'm not going there. So I don't know if I've just got more sensible as I've got older. But we did do like we sit in like a ball cage and it pulls you back in New Zealand, and then it sort of sends you out over the cliff. And I did that with my eldest son because I thought he'd enjoy that. But I get terrible motion sickness. I really enjoyed going skydiving. I just don't know if I necessarily need to go and do any more of it now that I'm older.
Yes, that sounds pretty wild, and I agree with you. Like, what's wild really changes over time, and as we mature, I guess, like going out after 8 o'clock feels pretty wild at the moment. I don't know about you, but
I think that every other tired mum out there is going, yep, yep.
yep, yep, that's us.
Happy to
Yeah,
be home by 10, not just getting
yeah,
ready to go out. But life changes. These are the seasons. We have to embrace the space that we're in.
absolutely. Okay, Chrissy, I was wondering if you wanted to open up your story. You shared a little bit at the start, but would you like to tell us a little bit more about your story?
Of course. Well, moving from Sydney to Geelong at a time when our youngest son was given a medical diagnosis of a condition called Duchenne muscular dystrophy. He was 2 at the time, which was really early to be diagnosed. That's a whole other story. Let's just call that mama's intuition. And what it meant was in a new city and making new connections and taking him to a new daycare and speaking to the school and making friends and everywhere where he was struggling. Muscular dystrophy, it's a progressive nature that affects the muscles. They don't rebuild. So there is a weakness. As a youngster, he would trip, fall, couldn't get up off the ground with ease. Progressively, it becomes worse. You know, our entire body's made up of different muscles. He stopped walking when he was 10. He's now fully in a wheelchair, and unfortunately, there's no cure. So we just look at each day as a gift. But during that time, what was happening was as I was having to explain our situation or set up the supports for him, you know, for him to go to daycare, I was so connected to the trauma of the day when we received the diagnosis. So what I was saying before is if you imagine, like sometimes when you smell cookies or you smell a perfume and it can take you back to a certain moment in time, and people's like, that reminds me of my grandma or something, you know, it can be something really wonderful that you're connected to. The opposite also happens. We can be super anchored into an experience. And for me, every time the word Duchenne, literally the word came out of my mouth, I had a physiological response. I felt the pain. I actually physically felt the pain in my chest. And I had this emotional response because I was holding on to so much of the anger and the fear and the sadness and all those big emotions that sort of wrapped itself into that word. And I was so connected to it. It was a really unproductive state to be in, but I was so stuck there because I was still trying to process. I hadn't learned how to process that part of our journey. And it took a while. I'm not going to lie. This took a long time. And it was also having really quite significant health impact. I was having migraines, panic attacks. It really impacted our relationship. And it just got to the point where I was like, how do I stop this happening? I don't recognize myself. I don't understand why this is happening. Is this going to be like this forever? And so I started asking the questions and I started asking other people. I was like, you know, what did you do to get through this? And started asking for some strategies. And the person who was a great friend at the time directed me to some modalities to learn, to actually go and learn myself, you know, could go see a coach or a therapist. I did a few different things. And I went and I learned a lot about how our unconscious mind works, about how to change the neurological pathways so to release that anchor of all that negative stuff so that I could literally sit and have this conversation with you now and I can talk about Duchenne and, you know, my little boy and this awful journey that he is going on, but I can do it in a state of, composure. It does not mean that I don't have really bad days and really bad times. It's an emotional roller coaster that, everyone who has a child that's gone through a diagnosis with will attest to. But I think what's brought me to the space here is because of COVID and the training that I did, is that I now have the strategies so that if I do have a bad day or we have challenges come up, I know how to move through them. But looking back at that early part, I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't even know that there were ways to go about changing and rewiring how I felt about the situation. And I was really stuck on, that saying, what you focus on is what you get. I was so stuck on all the things that we couldn't do, all the dreams and all the expectations of, traveling internationally and living somewhat, international lifestyle with family all over the world and, our kids being born in different parts of the world. I was so focused on what it had taken away from us and all the things that we weren't able to do and all the things that had changed. And I had to learn how to rewire and understand, okay, this is how it is now. And let's try and find joy in the space that we're living. I haven't necessarily mastered it, but I've taken steps and now I feel it's a responsibility to be able to share this and try and reach other parents who are going through something where perhaps a diagnosis of a child or a situation in your family has thrown your expected path off the trajectory you thought you were going on, and you find yourself in a different space. And we were saying, we could sit here and talk all day because it does. It affects relationships. It affects your relationship with yourself. There can be other children in the family. It affects their relationship. There's so many different avenues, but just to try and keep it succinct that we're not here all day, is I'm really here today to say that when you're down in the depths of dealing with the change and dealing with the times where you're feeling stuck, it's really important to learn to ask for help and find the supports and start asking those questions. Whatever you're challenged with, asking, what do I need to be able to move past this? And then looking for the answers, because there are incredible answers and there are incredible resources and strategies that can absolutely help you move through the place that you're experiencing.
Thank you so much for your vulnerability and willingness to share all of that. And I feel like behind all of that, you can just sense that level of hope as well, like that there is hope for us to overcome those absolutely dark feelings. And like you said, find that joy. So it's very powerful. Next question is around your journey, and what have you found to be the most challenging part of the journey, and how did you overcome that?
Most challenging part. I'm quite visual, so I get a sort of a picture in my head. There's probably two answers to this. The most challenging for me was watching Zachy when he was doing his trials to be in a wheelchair full time. That was challenging. It was challenging because it was such a visual representation of everything, all the changes that were happening for his body. And it represented sort of a massive shift in his journey and challenges for, getting around, getting in the car, getting to school. There was, a lot going on there. For him, it was such a great experience. He suddenly had a way of getting around with ease without worrying about tripping over or being left behind by his mates. So it was a very different side of the story for him. But I remember that was a tough part of our process. But I think, if I'm really honest, is if I go all the way back to that sort of space, it was about 2019 where I really had to take responsibility for how I was showing up. And instead of feeling like everything was happening to me, why has this happened? You sit in that, for lack of a better word, that sort of victim space where it feels like you're not in control and everything's just, this is so awful. And taking responsibility and drawing the line in the sand and saying, actually, I can't change this. This is the hand that you've been dealt. You cannot change these cards. As awful as it is, the only thing I can change is how I react to it. Like, how do I now respond to the situation? And I had a choice, and I had to learn to move out of that space of that really feeling sorry and being flooded with those negative emotions to be able to say, okay, where can I shift into a more positive space, take responsibility, and then move forward in that way. And it is kind of like a before and after, almost like a sliding doors moment. I kind of remember literally picking myself up off the floor. It just came a point one day where I just had to say no more. I have to take responsibility and start to be living at cause rather than the effect of everything that was happening to me, take back a little bit more control and stop focusing on that lack, focusing on the things that we couldn't do and sort of shifting it to that sort of space of, well, what can we do?
That must have felt very empowering shift in your whole presence. And
I think we're always going to have challenges. I think all of us going through this space. And I was thinking about this earlier, when the kids are little, there's challenges. And then as they get older, the challenges are still there. They just change slightly. And it's all about finding the resources and trying to make sure that you've got the right support in place to help you. Because you were talking earlier about just the concept of the village, and especially, like us, where we move around a lot and we haven't specifically grown up in an area where we've got lifelong friends. Again, it's up to us. We have to take responsibility. We have to be in the place to be able to go out and say, hey, I really need to connect with other parents or other mums or dads or, caregivers that are experiencing sort of similar situations. You have to build your village these days, and it needs to be something that you have to take responsibility for.
absolutely. And one thing that I really started thinking about after what you shared is that also how different our experience can be from our child's perspective and how they feel certain situation, what you were referring earlier in terms of the trial with the wheelchair, like how different both of your emotions and perspective in that situation was. And that was really like eye-opening for me to realize that they can have very different insights into the same situation.
And they can be so resilient. But when I pushed myself to go in and learn new strategies, it was also, I had a mentor at the time who used to say, no story, no problem. Stop creating the story about everything that's going on, because that just creates the problems. And I was like, how do I set myself up as the role model so that my child also doesn't grow up with the why me attitude? As much as he is, quite frankly, entitled to have those days, it's also important for them to know not to lean into that victimhood. If you can imagine that space of, where people feel like this is terrible and this is awful, and you can have those times and those days and you can sit with that, but just don't unpack and live there. Come out the other side and look for the joy, look for the things that can help you keep moving forward, because every day is precious, right? None of us know what tomorrow holds. So worrying and the anxiety about what tomorrow or next week or next year brings is actually not a great use of energy, because as we get older, we've all gone through different levels of grief now with losing people in our lives and having these experiences, that it just makes us realize that actually we just have to be grateful for every single day and make the most of it.
The best way to live.
I totally agree. And a huge part of my journey was meeting another mum at a similar time. And she had lost her little boy a few years prior to this. But when I sat and I heard her story and felt her grief and the experience that she went through, it gave me such a different perspective. So that when I was having a really tough day and I was having a tough moment, I was able to hold my son. And just in that moment, those are the precious memories that I hold on to. She would give anything for one more day to hold her little Casey, and I honor Sarah's journey and all parents who have gone through this particular journey, which is so incredibly unfair and challenging. And part of my realization was that, yes, what I was going through was absolutely awful, but let's look for the joy, and I can give him a hug, and we're going to get through this no matter what. We're just going to take it day by day. And we've lost many children in the community from age 7 to 12 to 16. And as each family goes through that part of the process, it's just a matter of, at the end of the time, all I think any of us can do is just have been loved dearly and to have experienced that. And so I take every opportunity, and the precious memories are every day when I give my kids, my family, anyone around me a hug, tell them that you love them. I think that's really all that most of us can do at any time, no matter what your journey is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's those small moments that really does make a big difference. And they're the ones that keep us going as well. Thank you so much for sharing that. My next question is around what kind of things do you feel like this journey has taught you?
So many things. Like, we could be here all day. If I was to try and pick out a couple, I think I said earlier about asking the questions. So looking for people who have been through a similar journey and reaching out. And that could mean posting in a Facebook group. It could be looking for resources in the community, carers programs, that kind of thing. And it might not happen the first time. You might have to keep pushing. That's something else that I feel quite passionate about, is that it can actually be difficult to connect with the right services, to find that support. Don't give up the first time it doesn't work. You have to keep pushing and asking the questions. If I may use like a metaphor that you may have heard before, is that, we're all going through the storm, but some of us are in super yachts and some of us are in a boat with one oar. And I've always loved that metaphor, because I feel like if we're on this ocean of life and we are experiencing different storms at different times, and you might see somebody else cruising by on their super yacht and they've got crew, they've got support, which is like their family who have the kids on the weekend, and life looks amazing for them. It can cause a lot of negative self-talk. And I use that sort of analogy of maybe you go past somebody else's boat and it looks great on the outside, but you don't see them. Perhaps they're downstairs, like bucketing out the water because they've got a leak, and they're too busy to wave and say, hey, I need help. So sometimes we've got to knock on the other person's door. Like, if someone's a bit quieter than normal, or even just for no reason, just when you feel like you're in the space to be able to check in on someone, I think it's really, really important to say, hey, how are you doing? Right? You just want to check that boat, make sure that they're okay. And if you find yourself where suddenly you've lost an oar for whatever reason, metaphorically, and you're not in a good space, we have to take that responsibility. We have to be able to turn around and say, I'm struggling. I'm not feeling great. I'm not in a good place. And hopefully you've got the right people around you, or you go and seek out those people. And what I was so blown away with, and I said this to you earlier when I opened up your email, and it says together through the storms. And I'm like, my whole visual sort of representation of doing exactly even this is that we're tying up our boats together to navigate through the storm. Because if we're just one little vessel and, we're getting thrashed around and we don't necessarily have the resources, the only way to get that is to put your hand up and say, hey, I either need help or I can help you, and tie together. It comes back to that concept of the village. It comes back to being responsible for everything that's going on in your life, everything that is going well, everything that is not going well, and being able to say, I'm looking for a solution. What do you think is a good way to move through this? How I'm feeling, how I'm dealing with my emotions, how I'm dealing with my child or children, or your situation or your relationship. Because if you get stuck in that space where you feel like, oh, it's just too much, it's too overwhelming, everything's just happening to me, and it sort of breeds more negativity, right? There's actually part of our brain, and its job is to prove you right. So if everything is awful, if everything is turning pear-shaped, and that's what you're focusing on, that's going to exacerbate the situation. You're just going to bring more of that, and you're going to notice more of it. And you need someone to come in and tie their boat up and say, hey, it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. Maybe you do need some strategies, some coaching, some counseling, some therapy. It could be art therapy. There's so many different things out there. Please ask the questions. Please reach out to the people that will help you, and take responsibility to bring yourself out of that dark space.
So true. And I feel like the village can be found sometimes in a very unexpected place as well. So like you said, keep looking and trust that there is a place where you belong. It might not be right next door, but even like a community like this where you connect with other people online, or there's so many different ways how you can find your people, but just that feeling that you belong and there are people out there who are, if not on the same boat, then at least with a similar setup, I guess.
And not to make those assumptions, because I'm guilty of it, right? You think, oh, yeah, everybody else has got their shit together.
Yeah.
I'm doing fine. And promise you, we're not. None of us are doing a great job. We are
Mm.
all just making this up as we go, and having another parent or friend or someone to just to have an understanding that
Yeah.
not every day is great, and be able to sort of tap in and man, today was rough. And there are this great online program groups and that kind of thing, but you need to find your tribe. You need to find the people that will walk beside you. And if they are a few steps ahead, I can only hope that they're ready to turn around and share what they've learned and really help bring you through it as well, together through the storm.
Yeah, and that's how I feel you are. You guide us all. I could just sit here all day listening to your wisdom. What you just said summarizes this moment, I feel. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I haven't shared my story a lot, which is unusual, but I really feel like perhaps maybe it's time to just step into that, because if it does give one other person a little bit of hope to say, okay, what can I do to be better, feel better, grow more, then thank you to you for providing the platform for sharing, and keep listening.
Thank you. I'm so grateful that our paths came together. And like you said, I feel like there was definitely some destiny there in terms of the terminology around oceans
That was
and
cool.
storms and everything. Sometimes it's just meant to be, isn't it?
Absolutely. Thank you, Niina, so much.
Thank you, Chrissy. Thank you so much for joining me on today's emotional episode. I hope you enjoyed listening to Chris's inspirational story. I definitely did. If you feel triggered by any way, please make sure that you reach out for some help. I have linked some free services into the episode description. Please make sure that you reach out for those if needed. If you know someone who would love listening to this episode, make sure you share this on social media. I also really appreciate if you follow me on Spotify. That would mean the world to me. If you have any questions, any feedback to me, or you want to have a chat, please reach out on my Instagram, Together Through the Storms. I look forward to seeing you all here next week. Take care. Bye.